Put it in the bag over there. By Alimoli, put it in the bag. Good evening. Yes, we are here gathered at the Ohel, the new tent, and it just started to pour, so it's a bit noisy over here. We'd like to ask everyone to kindly find your seats so we can begin the program. We're gathered here this evening to pay respect to the memory of my father, grandfather, and the Rebbe's true chassid, Harav Yaakov Yehuda Rebbe Shua, whose yahrzeit is on the 15th of the month of Av, Chamisha Asar B'Av, today. So I want to begin with a story, a little about what we call Pirsum Rishon. I don't believe anyone knows this story. A few months ago, I visited Rabbi Ari Chitrik in his office, and somehow or another, I don't know how he got onto this subject, but he told me that his father used to have a customer or someone he did business with whose name was Simcha Kavalenko. Simcha Kavalenko. And every year, especially Purim time, when he would make a deal with him, he would get a check for then the organization called Tomchei Shabbos of Borough Park. Nowadays, there are many, many institutions that help out poor families in different communities. But I believe that the first, or one of the first organizations to begin helping poor families for Shabbos was Tomchei Shabbos in Borough Park. And this man of Simcha Valenko told Rabbi Chitrik, actually Ari Chitrik's father, one time he said, let me tell you, somehow or another again, they began to speak about Rabbi Hecht, and he said, let me tell you about Rabbi Hecht. He said, I met Rabbi Hecht, and I started to tell him a little bit about the work that we do in Tomchei Shabbos. And I'm trying to raise money, and things are going rough. So Rabbi Hecht said, come on my radio show. And Rabbi Hecht invited him for several weeks to come join him on his radio show. And Zaidi kept pushing and pushing Tomchei Shabbos. And he said that after that, it took off on a whole new level. Tomchei Shabbos was on the map, and the money started to come in a very, very big way. What took me about this story was because Tomchei Shabbos was the originator of this idea. And since then, there are so many other institutions which do similar work and great work. In Crown Heights, in Queens, etc., all over. And it started from one Jew who said, let me help this Jew out and make sure that this organization continues to, first to get off its feet and to be able to help out the many families that need to be helped. So, as we score up this chusim for Rabbi Hecht, here's another one to put on the map. As customary that we have one of the grandchildren to share his memories and reflections of Zaidi Hecht. We are now going to call upon Rabbi Mordechai Zev Hecht, the Rebbe Shliach in Kew Gardens, the chaplain of the United States Armed Forces, the Masker Bezdin of East Flatbush, and the many, many other titles that he carries, and the founder of Chesed of Queens. Morty helps many, many people get furniture and set up the houses. New Chassanim, they need furniture. They go to Morty's website and they get furniture. What a big schus that Mordechai has. So we want to wish Mordechai great success and B'chovet Godol Horav Mordechai Hecht.
Too noisy. Can't hear a word. Way too rainy outside. All right. It's sufficiently difficult to speak above the rain. To all my uncles and aunts, those that are here, those who aren't, my cousins, my nephews, my nieces, all the fellow shluchim that are here from the family and those that aren't, rabbanim and guests. I want to share with you a very short thought today about kindness and about family. Shabbos, when I was davening for the Yomid, Keser, in middle of Musaf, a thought came to my mind. Keser yitnu lecha. A great crown was given to you. I thought to myself, this is Zaidi. Keser yitnu lecha. Hashem Elokeinu, who gave us this crown? HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Malachim amoynei mala. But right now, after 34 years, Zaidi is in Shemayim. So HaMalachim amoynei mala. This Keser is in Shemayim. But then we continue and we say, Im Amecha Yisrael kavutze mata. Not only is this crown in Shemayim, but this crown is really also with us down here in Olam Hazeh, Uncle Ari. When is this? That Amecha Yisrael kavutze mata, that is also with us down here. Yachad kulam. If we're all together, then Kedusha. Then we could say that the Keser Yitnu Lecha is with us down here in this world. So Ashreinu Matev Chalkeinu, that sometimes we get, how do we say it? Sometimes we get machshavas during davening. This was the machshava that came to me this Shabbos. However, the vart goes a little bit further. When can we also say this? And when is this perhaps most importantly said? Lecha yishaleshu. When we could say that the Keser continues to the yishaleshu, to the third generation and onward, then there's the true Keser yitnu lecha. Where does the crown carry on? In the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren. This is a famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, and it's based in the Pasuk in Mishlei, Perek Zayin, Pasuk Vav. And the Pasuk says, Ateres ekenim b'nei bonim, uteferes bonim avoisam. That the grandchildren are the crown and the glory of the grandfather. V'teferes bonim avoisam. And what is the beauty and what is the crown of the father? The children. So Mishlei says that in fact, children could bring out the greatness of their father by perpetuating their father, and grandchildren could bring out the greatness of their grandfather by perpetuating their grandfather. Says the Alshich. The Alshich was in the 1500s, a famous, one of the four that were called HaKadosh, the Chaim HaKadosh, the Ari HaKadosh, the Alshich HaKadosh. He has on this a long pirush. I'll share with you a short piece. In the middle of the pirush, on this pasuk of Ateres Ekenim b'nei vonim, v'tferes vonim avoisam, he says like this: She'ima ben tzadik atorah la'av. When is the father the crown? When the child is good and the child is like the father, so then he continues the crown of glory. Ve'im eina ben tzadik. But if the son is not a tzaddik, rak ben haben, the grandson picks up where the father left off. Gam hu atorah lezaken. He too is also great. Sometimes we have where the children aren't that great for whatever reason due to golus. But the grandchildren recover, the grandchildren recoup the grandfather's greatness. So the Alshich says that therefore the Mishnah is teaching us, the Pasuk is telling us a chiddush, that even though it skips a generation, still the greatness of the Torah of the father remains. Ki b'nei banim harei heim ki banim, because grandchildren are like children. V'zeu ateres ekeinim b'nei banim. However, the Alshich says, lo yishapach, not the opposite, and I'll just say it to you in English, not the opposite. If we find sometimes that the grandchildren are not the way the grandfather was, and they're not the way the father was, we cannot say that Teres Ekenim remains. The only way that Teres Ekenim remains is if the children and the grandchildren maintain that greatness of the tzaddik. And so the Alshich, and it's kedai to look up the Alshich in Mishlei Yud Zayin, Pasuk Vav, where the Alshich basically states that in order for the Torah to remain, there needs to be a continuum of performance. So I speak to you today, to my fellow uncles and aunts, and I also speak to all my fellow cousins and nephews and nieces and grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren, and I say it's very important, obviously, that we recognize the greatness of who Zaidi was, but at the same time it has to be that the children are the dugmachaya for the grandchildren, and the grandchildren carry on the torch of the greatness of this crown. For more information on this, you could see King George VIII. There is something which I noticed in the last 6 years working with the Moisid. Before that, I worked for the Moisid in camp, and then many years before that upstate. And there were many years in between where I took a break. Baruch Hashem, in the last 5-6 years working with my father, Uncle Shia, and Uncle Shimon, we have helped countless people in many different ways, continuing in that I should be Zeichet HaTeres Ekenim B'nei Banim and Tferes Banim Alav Voisam. One thing I think which stands out, which I was Zeichet to be a part of now in the organization of National Committee and Shalah, is the Beis Din, which we deal mostly with Shalom Bayis cases and Gittin cases, but this year also a lot of Dinei Mamonis, monetary matters. We started taking in all sorts of Din Teiros, and Baruch Hashem, a tremendous success. So there is something I think that Zaidi stands out with, and I'd like to just preface it with a story that I found recently in 2 places, and in each place it's told over a little differently. One is in Masechtas Ksubis, in Yerushalmi, Daf Yud Gimel, Halacha Gimel, and in Vayikra Rabbah, Lamed Daled, Parsha Beis. The story is told of Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha b'shem Rabbi Yochanan, and he says, the same way a person needs to have mercy on his almana, that means that when someone passes away, you need to have rachmanis on a widow, and also you remember the person that passes away, your beloved husband or wife. Kach chas al kfoid gvurushosoi. The Gemara says in Yerushalmi you should also have mercy on your divorcee. It's a wild Gemara. It's brought in 3 different places. The Omer Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha b'shem Rabbi Lazar mipsarcha loy tisalem zu grushosoi. The pasuk says in Yeshaya Nun Ches Zayin that your grusha, your divorcee, you cannot abandon her. You have to have derech eretz, even for someone that's no longer in your life if they were once in your life. It's a crazy and a wild Gemara, and the Gemara tells a story. What's a raya? What's the proof for this? It said that Rabbi Yosef Galili was a great Tana, 3rd generation, and Rabbi Yosef Galili had a wife, and she didn't show him respect, and the Gemara says how and why. And the Gemara says that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was once sitting with Rabbi Yosef Galili, and he saw that she wasn't respecting him. So Rabbi Yosef Galili's chaver, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, says, Shifka, Rebbe, send her away. The less he the ikoroch. She doesn't respect you. She doesn't live up to your level. Amalei parnei rabalai. I don't have the money to pay her to make suba, the value of the ketubah. Amalei ano yehivlach perena v'shifka. I'll give her the money. Send her away. Yahavlei perena v'shivaka. He gave him the money. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah gave Yosef Galili the money, and off she went. He divorced her. Rabbi Yosef Galili was a divorcee, one of the greatest sages. You'll remember from the Haggadah, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Yosef Galili, Rabbi Tarfon, Shem Mesuba b'Bnei Barak. He was a divorcee. So what did she do? She went and she married the treasurer, a rich guy, like often divorcees do. And she went and married a rich guy. It happened that he went blind, he became poor, he became a beggar, and started collecting money on the streets. One day, Rabbi Yosef Galili sees her. He hears she and her husband are fighting on the street. And he's telling her, there's got to be somebody else we can go to get money. Nobody's giving us money. So he says, there's one more person. He's a well-off to do guy, but more than that, he's a very kind guy. And he won't tell us no, but I can't bring myself to go to him. He says, who is this? And Rabbi Yosef Glili is walking by, says the Gemara. And Rabbi Yosef Glili sees his grusha sitting on the floor in tattered clothing, broken and crushed. And he says, this is my ex. My grusha. So he says, we got to go. So he sees them fighting, and she's losing it, and he's losing it. He goes, he calls them in. He puts them up in an Airbnb he owns. The Gemara says he had a house on his property, and he took care of them until they died. Unbelievable Gemara. Now let me ask you a question. What does this have to do with anyone? And why does he do this? The Gemara says this is a classic example of Yosef Glili, of someone who had a wife, and unfortunately he had to leave her for good reason, and he gave her a divorce, and here he's going and taking care of her, being kind. There are other mefarshim that say that this in fact was his niece, and the Gemara says that there's a mitzvah, the Rambam brings it lahalocha and that there's a mitzvah to marry your niece. So it wasn't just that he was taking care of Stam his grusha, but he was taking care of his family. What do I want to say? Zaidi was a person, if I remember correctly, and from all the things I've read and learned over the past 34 years, that's 3.5 decades, just give or take. Zaidi was not a person who did things for someone because of something that he would gain in return. If Zaidi knew that something was a chesed, that something was important, he did it. Even if it was to the point where it would be painful to them, how much more so painful to him? What would God want? What would the Rebbe want? What would the Rebbe do? What would Yosef Glili do? That's what Zaidi would do. He would go lifnim meshuras hadin to help people. Look it up. Do your homework. Kal v'chomer v'kol shekain, if it was family, what does the pasuk say? Mibsarcha loy tisalim. So I say to my brothers and sisters, nephews and nieces, uncles and aunts, cousins and friends, if there is something that we should do, something we need to do, something that would be awesome to do, is to remember this awesome value of our dear Zayda, of mibsarcha al tisalim, or loy tisalim. You cannot turn your eye away from those in need, b'chlal and klal Yisrael, and in this world. Kal v'chomer v'kol shekain, our own family. When we consider this and we understand this value, what would Hashem want? What would the Rebbe do? What would Zaidi do? If it's not family, do it. And if it is family, how much more so? To do what is right. We do good regardless because this is Zaidi's legacy. Then we could turn around and we could say, Then we could turn around and we could say that the Eibishter gave us something so awesome, something so great. Malachim amoyne malo. The Malachim are excited to have him. Im Amacha Yisrael kavutze mata. We're excited to have him because Yachad Kulam, because we are all together caring for each other and saying Kiddusha lechayish haleshu, for generation after generation. We're keeping and following in his footsteps, and then we can say Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Shkoyach.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Mordechai Hecht. As many of you know, it's 50 years now since Rabbi Hecht started to publicize the Siyumim on the radio. 50 years ago, when the Rebbe suggested and urged that a Siyum should be made every day of the 9 days, Zaidi then wrote to the Rebbe that he would like to organize the Siyumim to be carried live over then WEVD, and the Rebbe agreed to it. So it's 50 years now that these programs are taking place. in 1991, Tavshin Nun Aleph, when that responsibility fell upon us to organize the radio Siyumim, the Rebbe felt it wasn't enough of a challenge for us. So he went and he added another 6 days and decided not only to go up until Tisha B'Av, but to go up until Tu B'Av. But yes, Shleimer, we can say perhaps that it was in Zaydi's Chus that the Rebbe wanted the Siyum to continue on. And yes, Tisha B'Av is the culmination, Chamisha Asar B'Av is the culmination of Tisha B'Av. So we had the great chus to take over this great mitzvah of bringing simcha to the Jewish people. And we know that Rabbi Hecht, Zaydi was all about joy. Zaydi was all about simcha. He lived a life of simcha, even if things were difficult and challenging. And more importantly, he gave off a aura that people thought that Rabbi Hecht life must be great. He's always smiling. He's always going around with simcha. Little did they know that all he was worried about, not all that he was worried about, but one of the many things that he had to worry about is how to cover the bank and many other problems that he was trying to solve. But that simcha, he was fortunate to bring to many during these 9 days and up until Chamisha B'Av. And I want to give now a special thank you to Hashem Yisbarach. I don't remember what year it was, but we got a call from someone that he wanted to sponsor our Siyumim. And ever since then, the majority of our budget for the Siyumim is carried by this one individual. We didn't know the man beforehand. Now he became his friend, close friend of ours. But every year he has the schus to sponsor the Siyumim on the radio and now on Chabad.org as well. And what was that? That was all a miracle. It was a miracle. Zaydi took care of it. The Rebbe took care of it to make sure that the project you're working on, don't worry about it. I will provide for you the money that it takes to be able to continue this great work. We're now being joined on radio. We're going now, up until now, we're only on Chabad.org, and now we're going back, joining on radio station 620. We'd like to welcome everyone to our Siyumim, the final Siyum for this year, and hopefully this final Siyum of Golus. Don't forget, Siyum b'mishpat ipad v'shaveh b'tzedakah. We begin every program to give the giving of charity. And today we are honored, and I am honored to have my dear nephew, Rabbi Hecht's oldest grandchild, who is the Rebbe Shliach and the chief rabbi of Brooklyn Heights, Rabbi Aaron Leib Raskin, who is going to conclude for us Masechta Brachas. Oh, I'm sorry. Rabbi Raskin is going to complete for us Masechta Avodah Zarah. So without any further ado, I would like to call upon Rabbi Raskin.
Thank you, Rabbi Hecht, for that beautiful introduction. To begin with tzedakah. And in honor of my grandfather's yahrzeit, l'chaim, l'chaim, neshama shavan aliyah. And come back down and take us out of Golus, l'chaim. Today's Siyum will be on the tractate of Avodah Zarah. And here, the Gemara ends with a practical halacha, a practical law. And that is, if you have a knife, and the knife is not kosher, and now you want to kosher the knife, what do? Says the Gemara, you take the knife and you thrust it into the ground 10 times. That is the halacha. However, says the Gemara, you can only use that knife for cold things, cold food. You cannot use it for hot food. If you want to use it for hot food, then you have to do proper agola, which means to pour hot water on the knife. We're now going to do the Gemara inside, and the Gemara ends with a unique and beautiful story. Says the Gemara like this. Amar Rav Huna b'Rev Rabbi Yeshua. Rav Huna, the son of Rabbi Yeshua, says, Lechel b'tzoynein. When is this good to put the knife into the ground only to eat cold food? Ki had mar Huda uvati bar toivi. And now the Gemara goes on to tell the story of Rabbi Yehuda, as Rashi and Tosfos tell us, and a person by the name of Vati bar Tuvi. These two people have a Yosvei Kamei, the Shavur Malka. They were sitting in front of the king, Shavur Malka. Who was King Shavur? King Shavur was the emperor of Persia and Mesopotamia from the years 241 to 272 of the Common Era. A very powerful person. He was not Jewish, but King Shavur was proficient in Jewish law. He knew halacha. So when these two people sat down in front of the king, what did he do? Says the Gemara, Aitu lekame esrega. They brought the king an esrig to eat. What did the king do? Pasak and Ohel. He cut off a piece and he ate from that piece. Then, says the Gemara, Pasak v'havle levati bartuvi. He sliced off another piece and he gave the second piece to the person by the name of Bati. After that, what did the king do? Being that the knife was not kosher, he took the knife and he thrust it into the ground 10 times. He now made it kosher, and he sliced another piece of the esrig, and he gave it to Mar Yehuda. Pasak, Havle Lamar Yehuda. What happened? After he gives the esrig to Mar Yehuda to eat, now it's kosher, he made a bracha and he ate it. Is Amar Le Bati Bartovi. The first person who was Bati says to the king, my dear king, Vahu Gavra, Labba Yisrael, who? Am I not Jewish? For me, you give a piece of the esrig that's not kosher, but for Yehuda, you put it into the ground, you make the knife kosher. Says the Gemara, Armale, the king responded, Mar Kimle Bigavei. He said to Bati the following, I am aware of this scrupulous person, Rabbi Yehuda. However, I know that he would not eat something which is not kosher, even by the pain of death. However, Umar loikim li begavei. While regarding you, I am unaware. The Gemara gives another answer. Iked amri amalei itkar mai avarta beurita. Hadon Allah hasoich hazapoyel l'slik Allah mesech avodah zarah. So now to elaborate on the story a bit, and to perhaps connect it to my grandfather, Rabbi Yaakov Yehuda Hecht, of blessed memory. First and foremost, if the king knew halacha, he also knew that this person, Bati, was Jewish. How come he did not put it into the ground? And the answer is that there's another halacha, and the king knew this halacha. And the law is that a king is not allowed to do work in front of commoners. And for him to put the knife into the ground in front of a commoner is a prohibition. He was not allowed to do that. So for Vati, who would eat the fruit, because he would not die because of this, because of course if he would not eat the fruit, he would be committing treason and the king would kill him. So he had to eat the fruit. But Rabbi Yehuda would not eat the fruit. If the king did not kosher the knife, the king knew this, and because of that, the king went and he koshered the knife for Rabbi Yehuda. This is the story. How do we connect this to Rabbi Yaakov Yehuda Hecht and his life? My dear friends, I would like to connect, number one, the name Rabbi Yehuda to my grandfather, number two, the esrig, and number three, the knife. Number one, pertaining to Rabbi Yehuda. Who is Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Yehuda was a person who lived a life of Mesiras Nefesh. How do we know this? Because the Gemara says, Rav Papa asked Abaye, how come for us God does not perform miracles, but he performs miracles for Rabbi Yehuda? Says the Gemara, because Rabbi Yehuda lives a life of Mesiras Nefesh. Because he is willing to die for God, therefore he is worthy that God performs for him miracles. The Rebbe, in his famous talk on Zaydi Hech, said that this was a Yid who dedicated his life to chinuch, to educate children, in release time program, in Camp Amuna, etc., etc. And he said that Zaydi Hech does this biz mitoich mesiras nefesh. He does this to the degree of self-sacrifice. He puts his whole life and his whole soul into serving Hashem. So this is Rabbi Yehuda. What is the connection to the esrig? Why dafka an esrig? The king can have an apple, he can have an orange, a pineapple, a watermelon. Why dafka an esrig? We know what is unique about an esrig is it has a good smell and a good taste. When Zaydi Hech did a mitzvah, he did it with a smell and a taste. Many people do mitzvahs, they do it reluctantly because they have to. When he did a mitzvah, the whole shul was jumping and dancing. He davened with a geshmak, he said Havdalah with a behirus. Everything he did was with life. There was a taste to the mitzvah. There was a smell to the mitzvah. And finally, the concept of a knife. What is a knife? The Minchas Elazar says when you eat, everything on the plate should have a connection to Elokus. What should you think about when you have a knife on the table? So he says you should think about the statement in the Zohar, the Nama Apum Charbel Lechel, which means that you have to have a sword in order to eat bread. However, there's a teaching of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe says that really we have to learn it Charbel Lechel, and that is we have to eat the sword. We have to eat the knife. What does that mean? So the Rebbe gives a hesber. He explains that in truth, the idea of achila, the idea of eating, is elevating the sparks. And therefore, every day of our life, we are in a war. It's a war to take the good out of the bad, to elevate these sparks. But the ultimate level is to eat the sword, which means total ishapcha, total transformation. To reach the level when we beat the swords into plowshares, a time when the Garzev and Keves, that the wolf and the lamb shall live together. And this, I believe, is the meaning of the Gemara. When you take the knife and you put it into the ground eats up the knife. And you do this not once and not twice, but 10 times, because by doing so, you are elevating and transforming all the Eser, Koichas, and Nefesh, from Chachma, being the Das, etc., and all the Midos, and they become totally transformed. My dear friend, I remember once sitting with my grandfather, and he was in the office, and he sat me down, and he said to me, Aaron Leib, I want you to look at the wall. There are pictures, and there are many newspaper clippings. You should know, never did I do something to get my name in the paper. Never did I do something to have my picture taken with the president. I did it for the sake of God, for Torah, for Yiddishkeit, and I did it for the sake of the Rebbe. So we hope and pray that we who are children and grandchildren, who are inspired by Rabbi Hech, should continue in his ways, and we should be zoiche, like Zaydi said, on the day of Tu B'Av, the day that he passed away, Erev Tu B'Av. He said, Ich wart sein after Grace Yom Tif. I am waiting for the big Yom Tif. So we hope and pray to be zoiche to the big Yom Tif, as it says, Loi hoy Yom Tov Nisrach Hamishas B'Av, that there was never such a great Yom Tif like the 15th day of Av, with the coming of Mashiach, B'mheira, B'yameinu, Amen.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Raskin, for the beautiful Siyum on Masechtas Avodah Zarah. Again, we'd like to thank our sponsors and all those who helped make the Siyum take place, all the Messiahim, all those who studied the Talmud and concluded the Talmud. Special thank you to Mr. and Mrs. Luxembourg for their sponsorship, and reminding everyone that the Rebbe spoke about the importance of Avas Yisrael, loving your fellow Jew, as we mentioned already tonight, without any particular reason, just because the fact that the other person is Jewish. It's brought down in Svarim that already from the 15th day of the month of Av, we could wish a Kasiva V'Chasima Tova. So although our program is continuing here, but being that our people listening to us on the radio, and they will be shortly coming to an end, the radio program. So we wish all of our listeners a Kasiva V'Chasima Tova, Shana Tova, Mesukah. God should bless us, that the new year should be much, much better than the past year. And we know that when difficulties come about, when challenges come about, the purpose is to see the light. And we are waiting to see the light, the light that comes from the darkness that we had to live through over the past year. I want to give a special thank you to Chabad.org and to Rabbi Yonason Hackner and Shmayor Hackner for their assistance. And now we go back to the radio station and to Chabad.org. We continue on Chabad.org now. Are we saying Kaddish for Rabbi Hecht? Shalom. Saying a Kaddish on the Siyum? What? Yiskadal v'yiskada shmei rabba. V'yom adivrach Yerusei v'yam malchusei v'yasmach b'gonim v'gonim Mashiachei. Chayeichenu yomeichenu chayet chol b'Yisrael b'agolot ma'kor yimno amen. Yehi shmei rabba v'vorach li'olam maya yisbarech v'yishtabach v'yisbar v'yisnem v'yisnasei. Sador v'yisalev v'salol shmei gudsha b'richu. V'yehi lam v'gol v'chasa v'shirasa v'chasa v'nechamasa d'amirim v'yom v'yimno amen. Al Yisrael v'rabbonim v'al-tamidim v'al-kol talmidis hamidim v'al-kol mondas kem b'yraisa. Die Basra Dame die Bachala Savasar. Yehi Lang Chain Shlama Rabba China V'Chid V'Rachem Chain Arichin Muzayin Revicho. From Kon Kon Av V'Nishmayim Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Mishmaya V'Chaim Toyim Malim Lakoy Sovim Amen. Oy says Shalom Amen. V'Yad Shalom Aleinu Lakoy Sovim Amen. Over the last 33 years, when we gathered together here in honor of the yard site of Rabbi Hecht, there were two main speakers. One was a family member relating some of the memories that they remembered and they have as a grandfather or father or uncle. And the other one was usually a person in the rabbinate who knew Rabbi Hecht well. And we always tried to find someone who worked together with Rabbi Hecht. Tonight, we are honored to have with us Rabbi Moshe Bogomilsky, who goes back with Rabbi Hecht way before I remember, way before I was born. And I don't know, I'm not going to mention them in order necessarily, but number one is Rabbi Bogomilsky would always work with Rabbi Hecht when it came to the rallies. Rabbi Hecht had to introduce the psukim, the 12 children, to get them together, organize it. Rabbi Bogomilsky was there at Rabbi Hecht's side helping him out. When Rabbi Dvorkin passed away, and Rabbi Hecht did not have a rabbi anymore to sell his chametz to, being that Rabbi Bogomilsky was the one who sat with Rabbi Dvorkin and sort of negotiated the deal of selling the chametz, Rabbi Hecht decided to join forces with Rabbi Bogomilsky, and together for many years, Rabbi Bogomilsky assisted Rabbi Hecht in selling of the chametz, and now till this very day, 30 years later, we are still selling the chametz together, myself and Rabbi Bogomilsky. We want to wish him, Rabbi Bogomilsky, Arichas Shamim V'Shalom Tov for many more years to come. And then many, many years ago, probably over 50 years ago, the first year that Hadar Torah went to rented a summer camp that first year they did it together with the Lubavitcher Yeshiva. And something tells me that Rabbi Bogomilsky was involved then. I may be wrong, but I think it was back on Loch Sheldrick. And again, and then over the years, when it came to special projects, different things, government programs, etc., with Mommy and Daddy, Rabbi Hecht and Rebbetzin Hecht, Rabbi Bogomilsky was very, very helpful and worked together with them. So it gives me a great honor to introduce to you tonight Rabbi Bogomilsky to come up here and share with us some of his thoughts and inspiration for all of us here together.
Okay. Good evening. It's on? Good evening. As you heard, I go back many years with the Hecht family, but it goes back even before that also, because it so happens that I grew up in Williamsburg. Originally my father was at Rov in the Bronx, but then later when he passed away, we moved back to Williamsburg where my grandparents lived. And your grandfather on 61 Harrison, if you know the address, that was where he lived in Williamsburg. And I remember yet when Peretz used to daven in the Polish Shtibel in Williamsburg, and Sholem became the rabbi in the Nutzachari Shul, the Chevra Ladin Nutzachari on Keep in South Fifth. Goes back many, many years. I had a call a few days ago from my good friend Rabbi Shimon. And he says to me, my father's yahrzeit is coming up, and we'd like you to be the guest speaker at the event that we make will cover the yahrzeit. I agreed because I knew Rabbi Hecht, whenever he was asked to do something, he also agreed right away. But I made a mistake. I forgot to ask Shimon which Rabbi Hecht he wants me to talk about. Because there's a Rabbi Hecht that was a rabbi, there's a Rabbi Hecht that was a chassid, there's a Rabbi Hecht that was a public speaker, spoke on the radio, and in the book over here that I have, Brimstone and Fire, it takes 2 pages to describe all his different activities and his involvement in different organizations. So the question remains, and I could speak a lot about many of them, maybe not all of them. So it seems like he left it to me, and I had to figure out which Rabbi Hecht I should speak about. So I reminded myself of Gemara. And based on that Gemara, I made my decision which Rabbi Hecht to speak about. I know by Hasidim, eulogies is not popular, but we do talk at a levaya, we do talk at a gathering to a shloshim, and there's a Gemara in Masechta Shabbos towards the end where the Gemara says the following: Omer Rav Yehuda berei the Reb Shmuel Bashilus. There was a Tana by the name Reb Shmuel Bashilus, and Reb Yehuda, the son, said in the name of Rav. What did he say? He said, Me'aspedei shel Adam, from the type of a eulogy that's made about a person, Nika, you could recognize Im ben Olam Haba, if he's a person that fits into the category to be a ben Olam Haba. So the Gemara comes along. I'm not going to explain that part right now, but the Gemara comes along and says, Eini, It's not so. V'ha'ama Rav Rav Shmuel Bashilas, Rav said to Rav Shmuel Bashilas, Ocham li be'espeda, take care to deliver a moving eulogy about me. The Hosam Ka'imna, because I'll be there. There's a lot of different pshatim, what the Rav meant over here. One pshat that he meant, I'll be there, so I expect you to say the right thing. There's a lot of people that, by a hesped, begin to say things about a person, and you wonder if you made a mistake and came to the right levaya. I remember there used to be a funeral home in Borough Park, Norman Jeffer. So whenever the rabbi spoke, he also wanted to put in a personal note. And he gets up and he says, I knew this man. For the past 20 years, we drank coffee every morning together. And someone gets up and says, I didn't know that you were in jail. So, and there's another taich, the Hosam Ka'imno, that's a Chsidish taich, based on a Shalah, that the Shalah says that in this world, a person is a mahalach. He continuously is progressing. And when he comes up in the higher world, he becomes an oimid. He doesn't progress anymore. And his progression there is contingent on the people over here conduct themselves and do things le'ilu nishmosai. So he said, the Hosam Ka'imno, because over there I'm standing and I can't do anything, so I need you to inspire the crowd so that they should follow in my footsteps, and it will give me credit over there. The Gemara, I'm not going to go into the lumdus of the Gemara now. And the question is, Rav Shmuel Bashilas was a Tana. He was a Choshev, a Tana. The Rebbe once said that Shilas is a Rosh Tevis, Shivisi Hashem Lenegdi Tomid. He was a real Chassidish and Frume Yid that always had the Eibishter in front of him. But why did Rav pick Rav Shmuel Bashilas? Rav was the greatest Tana in his generation. In fact, his real name wasn't Rav. His real name was Abba. But he was called Rav because he was the greatest in Bavel. Just like Rabbi Yehuda Hanossi is called Rebbe, and not by his name Yehuda, because he was the greatest Tana in Eretz Yisrael. So I'm sure there was Rabbi Gamliel and there was Rabbi Kiva and all of them. I don't have to tell you who. Why did he pick Reb Shmuel Bashilas? Obviously, he felt that Reb Shmuel Bashilas would properly understand and evaluate him and present to the people who he was and what he stood for. In order to figure an answer to that question, I have to go to another Gemara. There's a Gemara in Bava Basra. Some people may be learning the daf, so they came across this a few months ago, where the Gemara brings a pasuk from Daniel. There's a pasuk in Daniel that says, "Umazdike harabim kechaychavim la'aygon vod," that those who make many righteous will shine like the stars forever. Who does that refer to? Who are these people, Mazdike Harabim, that make many righteous? So the Gemara goes on to say, Elu Malamde Tinoikus is the teachers of children. And the Gemara doesn't suffice with that, but the Gemara continues. And the Gemara says, if you want to have an example of who personifies a real teacher, there's one person that the Gemara gives. And who is that person? That the Gemara Kegai Ma, who? That the Gemara Reb Shmuel Bashilas. Yeah, Reb Shmuel Bashilas was a rabbi in a yeshiva, a teacher. And where do we see his greatness and his devotion and his unique behavior as an educator? So the Gemara tells a story. The Rav Ashrichel Reb Shmuel Bashilas, Rav once noticed Reb Shmuel Bashilas, the Habi Koi Beginsa. He's walking around in a garden. And some say that Reb Shmuel Bashilas owned his garden, and he was looking around, surveying his garden. Rav says to him, he said to him, Shavakta le'menusach? You're supposed to be in school with the children now. What are you doing in the garden? And some say that he asked him, did you give up your position as a rabbi in the yeshiva? So he answered him, it's already 13 years that I didn't step into my own garden. So after 13 years, I stepped in now. But I want you to know that even now when I'm walking the garden, I'm thinking about my students. In other words, when you want to have an example of a dedicated, a conscientious teacher, who is it? The Shmuel Bashilas. And Rav, the great Rav, that was the leader of his generation, and that's why it's called Rav, because he was great. When he wanted someone to talk about him, he selected no one else but the Shmuel Bashilas. Why did he do it? The answer is because the Hosam Ka'imna, that's what I stand for. There's a lot of things that could be said about me. My lumdis, my tzidkis, my involvement in the kahal, all these things. But there's one thing that was outstanding about me. And the one that could talk about it is if Shmuel Bashilas, the Hosam Ka'imna, he knew what I stand for. So when I have to talk about Rabbi Hecht, I don't have a question which Rabbi Hecht to talk about, but it's Rabbi Hecht, the educator. And in my opinion, when I was a Bach in yeshiva, I also went to release time. In fact, I had a release time in East Flatbush. I'll tell you the exact location. It was on near Linden Boulevard. I think it was 40, Schenectady. There was a Rabbi Zakheim shul. And the Rabbi Zakheim shul, we took children from a public school on Tilden Avenue, a few blocks. And over there I had my release time. And my release time was one of the larger ones, not the largest, but we had over 300 children in my release time. And you know, incidentally, the name Zakheim is a very interesting name, and it fits for the children that came to the release time, because they say that Zakheim is a Rosh Tevis, Zera Kodesh Heim. So we had this release time, and there were thousands of children in the release time. I remember not long ago, I got a call from one of the activists of the Aguda, and he says to me, a good friend of mine, he says, Moshe, what is this thing that Lubavitch is talking so much about Mashiach? I said to him, Bernie, the difference between you and Lubavitch is 15, 20 years. He said, what do you mean? I said, I'll explain you. I said, when the Lubavitch Rebbe came to America and he started the release time, so that time the Rosh Yeshivas came out against it. The children are not going to go to yeshiva and so on and so forth. And now, finally, you people woke up and you started a program called JETS. But your program, JETS, doesn't have as many children, maybe half of the amount of children, that I had in one release time. And if you ask me, who was the biggest Rosh Yeshiva in America? Well, who had the biggest yeshiva? The answer is Rabbi Hecht. He had a yeshiva of thousands of children. Taita V'das didn't have thousands of children. Chaim Berlin didn't have thousands of children. No yeshiva had thousands of children, but he had a yeshiva of thousands of children. And these children grew up, and many of them became Rosh Yeshivas. And let me tell you something that you may not know. Did ever instituted the idea of shlichus. And there are shluchim all over the world today. If I'd ask you I'm not testing anybody, but if I'd ask you, which is the biggest shlichus in America? And the answer is in California. California has over 400 shluchim. And who is the head of the release time in California? Rabbi Shlomo Kunyan. And who is Rabbi Shlomo Kunyan? I'll ask you. You may not know. Yeah, I'll tell you who he is. He's a little boy that grew up in the Bronx and went to public school. And in public school, there came a release time. And the release time teacher was Rabbi Sholem Mendel Simpson, Sholem. And he got the parents to send him to the Lubavitcher Yeshiva to Bedford and Dean. And that is from the Yeshiva of Rabbi Hecht. Now let me tell you another thing. I see there's a group, among the group here we have rabbis that officiate weddings. There is a minig Yisrael by a wedding, when you go with the chassan to the badekanish, to the kala, before the chuppah, that the rabbi and some prominent members of the community should recite the following. Acheseinu at hayi ve'alpei revava. You should be a myriad of tens and thousands. And the question is, who said this? Who was the author of this statement? You know who it was? Lavan. So we can't find anything else to say at a chuppah at this great moment except to quote Lavan, Achaseinu atayil alpei revava. There's different pshatim about it. What Lavan had in mind, I'm not going to tell you. But what we have in mind is, the Gemara says that Reiv Abanim is daimim lachei ha'em. That there's a resemblance between the brothers of the Kala and the offspring that they produce. So b'meila, so we say, Achaseinu, you're our sister. If you're our sister, we're your brother. Produce children like us. It's a bracha that we give to come. But a rabbi once asked the question, what kind of statement is it? I know people that have 10 children. I know people that have 18 children, 19 children. Can't go too much higher. I don't know anyone that has 11 children, 1,000 children. I don't know anyone has thousands of children. So I once heard from a rabbi that he said the following pshat. He said it's a bracha to the kala, that the Eibusher should help, that you should be wealthy and influential and help many yeshivas, and therefore all the children will be your children. It's a bracha that you will produce many children in Einakach, and they will be all your children. All the children that are produced from release time are all Rabbi Hecht's children. You have a big family. Everyone knows. I'll conclude with a bracha. Hecht is the name of a fish. The Rebbe once spoke about by Moshe Hecht. He spoke about fish. I also want to talk about fish, but I want to talk about fish where Yaakov gave a bracha using an analogy to fish. In the end of when Yosef brought his sons to Yaakov, and Yaakov blessed them, he gave a bracha. And the bracha was, V'yidgu l'roiv b'kerev ha'aretz. They should multiply many times on the land. And everybody asked the question, fish don't exist on land. Fish exist in water. That's their habitat. So why did Yaakov say, V'yidgu l'roiv b'kerev ha'aretz. He should have said b'mayim or bayam. Why b'kerev ha'aretz? Rabbi Hecht was a halacha person. I'm sure he knew the halacha. And probably everyone here also knows the halacha. That there are kosher fish and there are non-kosher fish. A kosher fish has snape v'kaskesses. That's the fins and the other part, the scales on the fish. Now there's a din in Shulchan Aruch in Yeridea, in Hilchos Dogim, that says that there are fish that in the water they have the simonim of kashrus, and when they come out of the water, they lose the simonim. And those fish are also kosher. It's not so popular. I don't know the exact name of that, but there are such fish. Yaakov's bracha was that v'yidgu l'roiv, you should multiply the kerev ha'aretz, even not only when you're in the water, you should be a chassid sheyid. Not only when you're in the water, you should be a Talmud of Taimcha Tamimim. Not only when you're in the water, you should be a Shem Torah or mitzvahs. Even by Mekerev Ha'aretz, you should keep the same simonim that you had when you were in the yeshiva. There you were a real chassid shabacha. There you were a real Yerushalayim. There you were a real chassid, even when you're out in the land. I see over here sitting, I don't know everybody here, but I'm sure they're sitting over here, children and Einakach, and maybe even Ur Einakach, among the men, among the women. And I want to give you Yaakov Avinu's bracha. V'yidlu l'roiv b'kerev ha'aretz. You should remain the same for all the years of your life as you were when you were a Talmud in the yeshiva or in the Beis Sifka. And Yaakov concluded, V'yikara bem shmi v'shem abaisai Avram Yitzchak v'Yaakov. They should go by the name of my parents and himself. What does he mean by that? He meant that when they told people that they are children or grandchildren of Yaakov Avinu, make sure that Yaakov Avinu is happy that you're happy with your yichus. You may be happy with your yichus, but make sure that he too is happy to call you a child or a grandchild or a son of his family. All of you be gebenched with Arich Hashem v'shanim tayves and a shiva v'chasima tayva. See this? My friend and colleague.
The movie says that Kunyan, when he did a shidduch with his children, the first question he asked was if the boy went on release time. He didn't go on release time?
The first thing he did when he came to California was a release time.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Bogomilsky, for your inspiring words. I forgot to tell you two things. Number one is Rabbi Bogomilsky over the last several years has joined the Bezdin of East Flatbush, and Rabbi Mordechai has the Av Bezdin of East Flatbush, and Rabbi Bogomilsky now sits on most of the Gittin. When we have Gittin, Rabbi Bogomilsky presides over them. On Gimel Tammuz this year, we had to a get that started 1 o'clock. It should have been finished by 2:30, and it was 4 o'clock and was still not finished. Rabbi Bogomilsky received a phone call from someone, and he asked him, he wants Rabbi Bogomilsky to go to Philadelphia to Fabring. So Rabbi Bogomilsky says, how can I go now? He said, no car. No, we have a car. And I'm thinking to myself, Rabbi Bogomilsky, he sat the whole day in the office. He didn't eat. How is he going to go now? And sure enough, Rabbi Bogomilsky said, okay, send the car, I'll go. And I was shocked. I was really shocked to see that Baruch Hashem, Rabbi Bogomilsky, he's one of our elders, Rabbanim and Chassidim, He's not a young 20, 30-year-old shliach. For him to go schlep out another 2 hours then in the afternoon. But he was ready to do it. And I was blown away by his Mesiras Nefesh, ready to go. I called him the next day. I said, how was it? He said, they never sent the car. But it makes no difference. He was ready to go. He was ready to go. So we thank you for your inspiring words. And may we remember what Rabbi Bogomilsky just said now, that all of us have the responsibility, that Rabbi Hecht Zaidi should be proud of us and never be ashamed of us saying that we are his child, we are his grandchild, because we are doing what he wants. We are going in his footsteps. And may we be blessed that this shall be the final yard site in Galus, and very speedily we'll go together. L'Artzeinu HaKadosha v'Kitzuranu Kol Sheikh Niyafar. Mashiach Tzidkeinu b'mheira v'meinu mamash. Thank you all for joining. A special thank you to Chabad.org.